Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hello my friends and welcome to another episode of Jen Talks About the Books Suggested in Her Book Rec Form. That's not a snappy title, so I usually come up with something a little more, with a little more pizzazz. But basically, if you're new here, if you didn't know, over the last, let's see, what would it be now? Over the last 3 years, I have had a book recommendation form available. So if you've ever left a comment on a video suggesting a book, I've likely asked you to put it into this book recommendation form. This form is linked in every video that I've made for the last 3 years, and it allows you to suggest a book, tell the author, you can say your name if you want to, you tell me the tropes or like what it's about, and then why you think I'll like it. We need to do a little bit of house cleaning with it, and again, first off, I want to say, I am privileged for any recommendation that you make to me. So please don't take this as a critique. I'm just trying to, help out myself and also help out you. I don't expect every person who suggests a book to me to know the entire catalog of thousands of books that I've read, just so you know. So don't take it as that at all. It's no big deal. But there's a couple things. I check this form weekly. I absolutely do. I check it. I see what the recommendations are. I add these books into my TBRs, or sometimes I don't even tell anyone and I'm just in the mood to read a book that you guys suggested to me, and I will go through this list using a keyword search, which is why it's very important for you to put the tropes in or what it is. Because let's say I'm looking for a dystopian apocalypse romance. Well, I do Control F on this document and it brings up all the dystopian reads. And in fact, I did that in June, and I found quite a few that I read from that. Also, when I'm making TBRs for events and stuff, like for Monster Mash, I was putting together that huge trope video that I did and deciding what I wanted to read. And I used this book rec form very heavily because I was searching for vampires and I was searching for ogres and orcs, and you guys came through. And a lot of the books on my TBR for that are from this form, so I love it so much. So again, please don't take this as a critique, but I am going to be upgrading my form a little bit. Now, it's still going to be the same form. When I update this, it's not a brand new form or anything. So all the recommendations you've ever given me still exist in the form, but I am going to be updating, like, I need some people to realize some of the things that they're doing. Number one, because I have every recommendation people have ever given me, you do not need to put a recommendation in there more than once. Let's say you recommended a book a year ago and Jen still hasn't read it and you really want her to read it. Well, you don't have to put it in there 4 or 5 more times because it's still in there. It just means I didn't get to it yet. And I know what it's like when we want our creators to read the books that we love, but I promise you, you don't have to put it in there more than once because I saw it and I clocked it, and if it has what it needs in there, I've got it. Like, we're good. Secondly, please read the disclaimer at the front before you do it. There are some types of recs that I just don't want, and as soon as they come in, they go out. So just save yourself some time and save me some time, and please read the top where it says, please only include the first in a series if you want me to read a series. You can put in the notes, hey, I would like you to actually read book 4 in this series, but this is the first one in the series. Because if you recommend book 6 in a series and you're like, no, you don't have to read the others, read this one, I'm still probably going to try to read at least the first or second before I read the one you recommended, because that's the type of reader that I am. And again, I say all this in the book rec form. So again, let's say you're recommending Immortals After Dark and you wanted me to read the 10th book, so you only put the 10th book. Well, when I go to look the book up, I'm going to see that it says it's book number 10 and I'm like, what's going on? And so I'm going to look up the first book and be like, oh, it actually starts with a hunger like no other. I'm going to read that book before. So again, it doesn't help if you just put that book, because I'm probably going to like erase that one and put the first one in its place, because I like to start at the beginning. It's just me. But again, there's a note section, so you can say, this is the first one in the series, but it really doesn't pick up until book 6, so I recommend this one, and then I'll know that. So you can put that in there. Again, it sounds like I'm giving you lots of rules for this, but I've had this open for 3 years, and I've had over like 1,200 recommendations put into this form. And I'm just trying to help us all out. Okay? So anyway, that's enough of me being picky. And I promise you again, I love these recommendations. As you'll see, some of my favorite books I've ever read have come in through this form, and also some books that were very quickly DNF'd and we'll just forget that they exist. And it is against no one if you recommend a book that is a DNF or is a 1-star read, as a couple of these are, because no matter how much you think you know a creator and what they like to read, my mood has changed. Books that were recommended to me 3 years ago, I probably would have fucking loved them, but my taste has changed a lot. And so when I try them now, I'm like, wow, this person doesn't know me at all. Number one, how arrogant of me to say, how dare this person doesn't know me. I don't actually ever say that, because how could you? And number two, I'd be like, yeah, when they recommended this to me in June of 2022, I loved these books. I have since, I don't really like them anymore. So the point is, as I'm going to go through these, which some of them I have the person who recommended it, and some of them I don't, because as I said, you can recommend anonymously. You can recommend your own book. I've had authors who use this form. In fact, if you're an author watching it, please feel free to recommend your book. Please don't put the entire description of the book in the what is this about, because that happens and it just clogs up my form with really huge things. Just tell me the tropes, tell me why you think I'll like it. But if you are an author, you are more than welcome to put your book in my form. As I said, it's been done before and I've read them and I love them. It's absolutely great. You can put fan fictions into this form. You will see I've read a crap ton of fan fictions that have been put in there, and I love that. For those, it actually does help if you put the link right to the AO3, but if you don't, that's totally fine. You don't have to do that work for me. I will, but it is helpful. And yeah, so again, those are the points. This isn't anything against the person who recommended it. If it's one that I gave a 2-star or I DNF'd it, I won't say the name of the person, because again, though I don't hold it against you, you might hold it against you. I don't know. Don't do that. But we're going to go through the books that I've read since the last time I made one of these. The last time we did one of these, we ended with the book Heat by Arlie Smith. And that was a really uncomfortable fail for me, because Arlie Smith is very talented. And there's a reason why she's seen as such a staple in the romantic horror genre. But her books are intense for me. So after that, and some of these books I won't remember perfectly because it's been a while for some of these, but the next book that I read was Penalty Kill by Genevieve Chambly. And I know I read this one for an MM. This is an MM sports romance. And I believe it's between, I think it's between an agent and a hockey player, I think is what it was. This one wasn't a huge hit for me. I feel like it went right to the sexy parts of it, and the conflict was just ridiculous for this one. But I gave it 3 stars because I thought it was a unique setup, and we went ahead with that one. Next, I read, you'll see, quite a few fan fictions in a row because I was in a mood for some fan fictions. And one of them was Hinge of Fate by Ramos. I can't say that I remember who this couple is, so let's look it up together right now. Oh yeah, okay. This one is a Hermione and Severus Snape, and she wakes up pregnant and she doesn't remember how she became pregnant. And so, and Snape doesn't want her to remember. So that's kind of the setup of that one. And I gave this one 4 stars. Then I read The Secretary by Pacific Rimbaugh from Dusty Dean. And this one, I am pretty positive. So Dusty Dean recommended this one. And thank you, Dusty, so much, because this one was a short, and it was a Percy Weasley and Pansy Parkinson, if I remember correctly. Now, I did end up reading the one before this. That was a Draco and Hermione. There was a few books in the series that were all kind of erotic short, not erotica, but they were shorts that were heavily focused on it. But this one is straight up is The Secretary. If you love Praise by Sarah Kate, if you like that kind of setup of in The Office, Pansy Parkinson is Percy's secretary, and they end up having a fling, and there is of course some BDSM involved as well. So I gave this one 3.5 stars, but I liked it quite a bit. It's mostly a 3.5 because it was so short and there wasn't enough character development in it for me, but I enjoyed it a lot. Next, I read 10 out of 10, and this is by fanfic author Morgan Mercy, and this was recommended by Julia Martin. So Julia, thank you so much. I give this one a 4.5 star. Now this one is an arranged marriage, but it's a marriage law situation. So Hermione and Draco get paired up, and they need to, try to make a baby for the marriage law. And it's called 10 out of 10. And this was really cute because the author inserted graphics that have to do with this. So Hermione is going to try to find a way to end the marriage law. But in the meantime, she needs to be with Draco and be married to him. And they need to have sex by a certain date, I think, or else they could both end up in Azkaban. But they're like, we're not just going to jump into this. So they start this chalkboard in their home that at the end of each day, they update how close they are to feeling a connection. And so it starts at a 0 out of 10. And as it goes up, the number gets higher and higher and closer to 10. And so this one had great chemistry. It had great buildup and steam once we, so much anticipation, so much heat building up, because you just want that board to get to 10 out of 10 and you want them to be together. And it was just really well done. This one was also not overly long, and I liked it so much. All right, so next we had this is one that it was definitely already on my TBR, but when I looked through, I saw that someone had recommended it to me, and it's Funny Feelings by Tara DeWitt. I loved this a lot. I recommend it quite often. So this one was recommended by an anonymous person. They didn't tell me, but this was a 5 out of 5 star read for me. This is a friends to lovers. It's Farley, who is fake dating Meyer, who is her manager, and also he was a comedian before. He's a single dad, he has a deaf daughter, and they're this odd family unit where there's this chemistry between them, but they don't want to ruin the friendship that they have. But then it becomes pertinent for her career for her to have a partner, so they're fake dating for the public eye, but they have this absolutely beautiful connection. And this book really looked at grief and moving on in a very beautiful, mature way, but also with just so much sweetness. So I really loved this. Thank you so much to whoever recommended this one. Again, this was 5 out of 5 stars for me. All right, next, and I forgot to grab this one. I actually have a copy of it. We have a manga, and this one was The Titan's Bride by ITKZ, and this was recommended by the Disreputable Dog. So whoever you are out there, Disreputable Dog, thank you for this rec. This was one that I remember it being in my rec form, and then I kind of forgot it, right? Because again, there's a list of hundreds of books in there. But then when I was going through looking at some manga, my person at Barnes & Noble was like, girl, have you read this yet? And I was like, no, I haven't. Tell me all about it. And she did, and I wanted to read it. So this is an MM manga. It's a he's too big for sure. This one is one of the most erotic manga that I've read, the most explicit that I've read, because very often they blur things out or hide things so something's happening, but there'll be a lot of let's say someone is touching a sexual object and it won't actually be there. I know there's names for these styles. It's not something that I'm super familiar with as of yet. I'm slowly learning. But this one is it's straight up, it's there. But we have this young, I can't remember if he's a senior in high school or if he's just started college, but he's lost his mom, and he ends up being torn out of his world into this magical world where there's a Titan there. So it's this giant who is proportionally giant everywhere. And he, how do we say this? He realizes he was calling his bride to him. And he's supposed to be with this person to produce and have children. And he's like, well, it's a man. We can't do this. So I don't know if this series will lead to MPreg, but he's supposed to be his bride. And so he goes about convincing him to be his bride. And he's like, give me this amount of days to prove that we're supposed to be together. I've read 3 volumes of this, and I really enjoyed it. It's probably my favorite. Yakuza Lover used to be one of my faves, but this is probably actually my fave right now, because I've stayed engaged in the story, whereas Yakuza Lover kind of got boring and just floated. And I'm like, what are you doing with this story, But yeah, I gave this a 4 star. I really liked it. Okay, next we have another manga, and this one is Till You Come Into the Water, and this is from Ginger Teas and Sympathy, and this was recommended by Lily Knives, and this one was my first Fred and Hermione, and this one's just a short one. They're actually both still at Hogwarts. She is going into the prefect's bathroom, and Fred like sneaks in there, and they end up having some sexual experiences in the prefect bath, which is pretty hot, and then they end up in a relationship together going forward from there. So this was, yeah, my first little taste at that, and I really enjoyed it. So I gave this one 4 stars, and it led me to actually read more Fred and Hermione pairing, and I was here for it. I loved it. I loved it. Okay, next we have one, and this is one that I hesitated to put it in here because it was already being recommended quite heavily by Crystal, but again, when I went through the form, I realized someone had recommended it to me quite a bit before Crystal ever even read it, so I wanted to give the credit where it was due. So A Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. Basically all of her books were recommended through the book rec form, but this was the first one that like queued me up to her, so this is one that's here. This was actually recommended by Drea. This, of course, was a 5-star read for me, and it led me to read all of her books. Just, I can't wait for more. I'm a little sad that I fell for her right before she had her baby, and now we just have this huge like wait, and also now her books are going to be with Bramble, so it could be even longer before we're getting them, but it's okay. I won't be bitter about it. It's fine. It's all good. It's good. But no, I adore this story. So yeah, this one is Tasana and Max is the romance, but there's also another character who gets introduced later on. The series is fantastic, and it's about a woman who's been in forced sex slavery and prostitution for years, and she's finally earned enough to get out of it, only to have her owner be like, how dare you? How dare you think that you can get away from me this way, that you can leave me this way? Fat chance in hell. But she ends up, with the help of a friend, escaping this. And she makes her way to the Orders, who is an organization that's fighting against the evils of the land. Of course, they're not perfect. They have their own evils as well. But when she gets there, it's clear that she has some raw talent for magic. These butterflies, it's so beautiful. This story is just so powerful. Now, this is a very low steam trilogy, but honestly, it hit me at the perfect time because I was getting burned out with how fantasy books were being written, and then just like spice was thrown all over the walls with it and everything. And I just think this was so well done and so powerful, and I'm just so happy that I was introduced to this author because she's fantastic. So yeah, thank you so much to Drea, and of course also to Big Sis, because as she was reading these, I was like, I have to read them. Next up is Where Violets Bloom by Daisy Jane. Now, I had actually read the 3rd book in this series first, which is called With Force, and that one has like CNC in it, and it was a really powerful story. I really liked it. But someone had also recommended Where Violets Bloom, and so I actually read these like in reverse order, because I read Stray after I read With Force, and then I finally read Where Violets Bloom. And Where Violets Bloom is where we have Van, and he is a bit of a stalker, and he ends up like kidnapping our heroine to like keep her safe. And they have a very interesting dynamic. So I know this book didn't work a lot for some people because they didn't like him using his power as a police officer to be able to kidnap her. I mean, it's literally the point of the book is that he's able to do twisted things like that. So I don't know what to tell you. That's what we're getting into. But he is also still like so chaotic and sweet in how he does everything. And yes, he definitely does kidnap her. And yes, that's very uncomfortable to see. But it also just worked for me. It really did. So this recommendation got 4.5 stars. So thank you, Penny, for that recommendation. All right, next up, there was Doing It for the Order by Desert Sea. And this one was recommended by Gada. I think I pronounced that correctly. This one, I believe, is a Snape and Hermione, if I'm correct. And they end up having to be in a sexual relationship to fool Voldemort. So pretty simple. I've actually read that scenario a few times, but I gave it 4 stars. And I really enjoyed Desert Sea, the fanfic author, so I was happy to read this one. Next, we have this one was also one that I already had my eye on because, of course, I love this author. But I thought I would give props because this was recommended about like 4 or 5 times by different people. And I know they're different people because they put their names, so it wasn't just anonymous rec. So I decided to give this one to the viewers, even though I was going to read this no matter what. So this is Mortal Skin by Lily Mayne. This is book 1 in her folk series, which, yes, I still haven't read book 2. I have the audiobook for it. I have it ready to go, but I've just gotten bogged down with other things. And I know that this one has a cliffhanger, but book 2, I'm told, has like a happy for now, so you can read that one and like be okay. But she still hasn't written the 3rd one. There's going to be a final book in this. And so that's kind of my excuse, is like I'm waiting, but I have the audiobook. I'm ready to listen to it. I have gotten bogged down with things. And I also know that one's going to be pretty emotional, so I've been waiting. But this is an fae romance. This one I feel like would be a great fall vibe to read for sure. Like the changing of the seasons, the fae. I think there's an autumn court even involved in this. Is it an autumn court? I don't know, but there's the Unseelie and the Seelie courts. And yeah, there's a dark fae assassin prince and a mortal who's grown up as human, only to find out that he's not as human as he thought he was. Like, there's just some fascinating stuff involved in this. And yeah, I enjoyed this so much, of course. So this was recommended by both Kelsey and Renee Reeds. And then again, there was also a few other recommendations for this one as well. So I gave that one 4.5 stars. Next up, there is Of Heisen Hexes by S.L. Prater. This was recommended by Patricia. This one just didn't quite vibe for me. This was in a world, I have read a book in this world before where like witches, they need to be bound to like a sorcerer or a warlock, or I can't remember which it is, because if they're left on their own and they get so powerful, like then they want to kill them. So witches are only allowed to live if they are bound to a man, basically, is the point. And we have a heroine who's a bit like a Robin Hood character, kind of. And then our hero is kind of like the Sheriff of Nottingham. I believe I have that set right, but like he doesn't want to arrest her or do anything, but he also has only heard really like bad stuff of witches. And then he meets this woman who's trying to do good. And yeah, so I just didn't really feel the connection with the character. And this did end up being one that I gave a 3-star to, but I think it's a really unique world and I think a lot of people will enjoy it. This is the second S.L. Prater that I've read, and neither of them like really vibed for me, but if there's an S.L. Prater you think I'll like the best, feel free to recommend it to me because I'm not completely closed off from her. All right, next is another one that the reason why I'm sharing it as a viewer recommendation is because it was recommended to me a long time ago. This was recommended near the beginning of the form. So even though this is by an author that I absolutely adore and I would have read this book anyway, I'm still giving the credit to Monica, who recommended When the Roma Has Matched by Stacey Reed. This book is book 4 in the Wedded by Scandal series. It's a 6-star read. It's one of my favorites of this year. And I've talked about this book so many times that I won't get into it here, but I absolutely adore this couple. I'm actually rereading it in October because a patron has picked it to annotate. And I'm like, hell to the yeah, let's revisit Phoebe and Hugh. But this has a mute hero. It has a heroine who is pregnant. It's not his baby and she's in trouble. And yeah, it has an arranged marriage that's only supposed to be to help her, but it has a lot more than that going for it. But I absolutely adored this story. It is my favorite Stacey Reed that I've read thus far, and it just continues to solidify that she is one of my favorite historical romance authors writing today, and I adore her so much. All right, next we have The Monster Keeps Me Safe by Kitty Thomas. This book was a mindfuck for sure, and I do look forward to reading more Kitty Thomas. I really enjoyed the setup of this one. This woman is being kept captive by this madman who has convinced her that they're in a dystopian future, and he's the only person she has to rely on. That is what he's convinced her of. I won't tell you how, but this story also begins with that man getting his head blown off right in front of her. and now she's in even more danger than she was before. So there's that. Kitty Thomas has a really fascinating way of storytelling. I have one of her books on my TBR for October, and I also have some on my Kindle that I've bought before because I've seen other authors recommend her, specifically dark romance authors who love her. I've seen them recommended quite often, and that gets me excited for it. All right. Next up, there was Be Still My Heart by Sav R. Miller and Emily McIntyre. So this book was a mystery thriller. It really read like an episode of a mystery or thriller TV of some kind. And I enjoyed this. It was a whodunit. There's a murder in this small town. There's a body that shows up actually in a fisherman's trap, who he might even have some connections to, so it puts him in a tough place. We have a heroine who is charged with figuring out what happened, and it's a tangled mess, and it is delightful at the same time. So this had all the spooky, ghosty vibes. Now, an issue that I do have a lot with certain books like this is that I like there to be hints that we could figure out what's going on, but I also don't want it to be too obvious. And this was one that I don't see where there was any hints what was going on until we were slammed with what was going on. And that always bugs me a little bit. You know, it wasn't a paranormal element. It wasn't anything like that. There is it feels like it's a serial killer doing something, you know. But I just felt like, how was anyone supposed to know what this was? This felt like a bit of a cop-out. You know, you never know. You never know what's really going on with that, right? So, yeah. That had me a little bit irritated with it. But I listened to the audiobook for this, and it was very good. So I gave this one a 3.5 star. It definitely was still worth my time. All right, then we have one that, again, I gave it to the viewer Rex, but everyone was reading this book. Absolutely everyone was reading this book. And I knew without a doubt I would be reading it. And so I didn't put the second book as a viewer rec because that was already recommended by other people and I already had purchased it. But Mile High was, of course, a wonderful book. Just so good. And followed quickly by The Right Move, which was a 6-star read. That one, I actually read it for my Patreon. So it was a Patreon recommendation for one. And again, everyone all over Instagram was all over it. And I adored these books so much. So Mile High, nobody said who recommended it, but I did get it a few times from anonymous people. And yeah, this was a 5-star read, a flight attendant and a hockey player. And it was such a great story. I really love Liz Tomford's writing. I can't wait for the next book. And I look forward to whatever she's going to do next. All right, then there was Every Day a Little Death, and I, for some reason, don't have the fanfic author of this one written down, nor who recommended it, nor do I remember what it's about, and I'm not going to look that one up. I gave it 4 stars, though, so that's cool. All right, next we have Stray by Daisy Jane. So, as Daisy Jane was mentioned, I did have all of her books put in by different people at different times. So, Stray was recommended after I did a, the hero as a sub. And so, yeah, this heroine, she is getting a job as a dominatrix, and she gets called in to help as a assistant. Now, the place that our hero, who owns a gym, finds this advert is actually a secret webpage, and he doesn't realize that. So she comes in to help him out, and she starts doming him, and he's so turned on by it that he goes along with it and even pays her at the end without even really knowing what he did. But he knows that it was a really hot situation. So they end up continuing their relationship that way. And I enjoyed this one a lot. This one had some really kinky good stuff. This one had pegging in it. And I really enjoyed Stray. Obviously, I like this whole series by Daisy Jane because With Force was also recommended by a viewer in a previous video of these I did. So I really enjoyed that. All right, next there was Consider Me by Becca Mack. This one was also recommended to me by Joe from Not So Average Joe. I don't have who recommended it in my form, but this one was recommended by lots of people when hockey romances were going around. This one was is Carter Beckett, and he's just obsessed with the heroine, and he really goes for her very hard. He's very over the top in his affections and in his wooing. But then there was a third act conflict to this that I was like, the hero that you've built why would he act like this? You know, is that type of situation. I was like, really? Are we doing that? And it was also very long. This book was at least 100 pages too long. I really enjoyed the audiobook though, and I can't wait to read book 3 once the audio comes out. I do have book 3, but I've just liked the audios for these too much, so I'm going to wait for that. But definitely Becca Mack is a great hockey author if you... Next, there was The Lilac Tree by Lena 1987. I can't remember what that one is about. I know it's a fan fiction as well. I gave it 4 stars. Next, there is Lord of Eternal Night by Ben Alderson. So this was one that I had on my own TBR because I followed Ben on TikTok for a little while. But I sadly was let down by this one. This one was like a Beauty and the Beast, but it's MM. And the one hero goes to stay there to try to like break a curse. There's also like it's vampire kind of involved as well, and a beast, and just all of these things. And I didn't like the characters. Like I didn't end up liking the beast very much. And I feel like in a Beauty and the Beast retelling of any kind, like you need to like the beast more, and he just wasn't doing it for me. So I was sad about it. But I also heard from friends who've read more of this series by Ben that they liked it better going forward. So the next one is actually the one that first caught my eye from this author because it was a Hades and Persephone, but make it gay. So I will give that one a go. All right, next there was The Italian Obsession by N.J. Adele. This one was a DNF. I was so upset with who the hero of this is supposed to be. It grossed me out. This is the younger, like, basically he just felt very perverted. I don't have another way to say that. If you enjoyed this book, I of course am not shaming you because I have read books that have this situation in it before and been okay with it. But as I've gotten like older and as like younger people feel younger, and it just eked me out. But he basically knows that he wants to fuck her from when she's a young teen, and he's just biding his time until she's old enough and it's appropriate. And really, I don't know, I feel like the author could have made this work, but every line in the hero's head made him creepier and creepier to me. And she wasn't even of age yet when we're like getting to the story. And so I was like, no. So this maybe would have won me over as we went, but the answer was a hard no when I started this one. So we just DNF'd The Italian Obsession and we moved right along. All right, then we have You and Me by Tal Bauer. This, I don't have who recommended this one to me, and as I say, I wish that I could give you credit for this then, because this was a 6-star book for me. I've already read more books by Tal Bauer. I can't wait to read more books by Tal Bauer. This was fucking beautiful. This is 2 single dads. One of them, he knows that he's gay, he's out, and the other one, our main character here is Luke, and he's a single dad. He is a widower. Him and his son, there's such a separation between them, and it's just breaking his heart. He doesn't know how to get closer to his son, so he starts working with the boosters, and that's how he meets Landon. And it's this slow burn friends to lovers between them, and it's beautiful. So this is a 6-star read. It's a favorite of the year. Thank you very much to whoever recommended that. There is Unfurl by Elodie Hart. I don't have who recommended this one. This one was also a patron read, so it was annotated and sent to one of my patrons. This is about a sex club and a like program they had called the Unfurl program, where you can lose your virginity through it. So there's that. So yeah, that was a 4-star read for me. There was Takedown by Nikki Ash. This was recommended by Elizabeth. I don't really remember what this one was about too much, but I gave it 4 stars, so it must not have been too much. Then we have It Started with the Scandal by Julianne Long. So this one was also part of my 12 Recs from 12 Friends. This one was recommended by Jessin. So I already had this on my TBR, but when I was going through my book rec form, I realized someone recommended this before Jessin ever recommended it to me at the end of last year. So this one too, though, is like book 10 or 11 in a series, but I wasn't confused at all, and it made me more interested to read more Julianne Long, so I definitely will. But this one is a single mother who's been a bit disgraced, and we have a hero who is injured and needs a new housekeeper. And so she ends up being his housekeeper. This was such a sweet romance, but it had a bit of a beastie quality because he's very much grumpy. He's French. He is in a very tight spot because he wants to get his lands back, his name. And he can do that in like two ways. He can either continue working for the British government and being a spy, which is very dangerous work, or he can marry into a family and like that will help him keep his land. And so neither which of those make it smart for him to start falling for Elise. But fall for her and her young son, he does. So this was a 5-star read. Then there was Heart of a Reaper. This is by Y.D. Lamar. I won't say who recommended this one because I gave it 2 stars and I hated it. I really disliked it. So I'm sorry, the person who recommended this. I appreciate you very much. This is someone who's given me quite a few recommendations, and you've been on point before. But this one didn't work for me. It's supposed to be a Grim Reaper and the heroine, and it's one of those where if you like where like they'll burn the world down for just you, that's great. But he's literally a Grim Reaper, and I know that it's his job, but I just didn't like the hero character and like what his job was and how he did it. And there was also like our heroine being assaulted constantly and him not doing anything about it because he's like, oh, I can't. Well, it's like eventually he can fucking do something about it. So we just had to watch the heroine be assaulted and mistreated and horrible things happen in her life, and the hero's just like watching and waiting for the time to step in. And I'm like, author, you may have justified this however you like, but you ain't justifying it to me. So that was a 2-star read for me. There was More Than Survival by Kate L. Mary. This one was an apocalypse romance. This was one I actually had grabbed myself but I didn't know it was recommended to me because I was searching for dystopian and apocalypse romances. And this one is a novella length. It's pretty short. And so when I saw Megan T recommended it to me, I was like, oh, cool. I'll get to this one faster. And this was exactly the case that I mentioned in the beginning, where sometimes I'm looking for a dystopian romance. And in this case, I had looked on Amazon first and I had saved a bunch of them that I found. And then when I went through my form, I saw someone recommended it. So yeah, this one's a shorty. The heroine has lived with her uncle, and one day he goes on a trip to town and doesn't come back. And of course, they're in a secluded mountain cabin. It's the apocalypse. They've been surviving. She's been with him for years, but it's just been them. And he doesn't come home. And then she happens to be out trying to bring wood in, and she ends up hurting herself and crying out. And it just so happens that our hero, he's in a small cabin that's like a ways away, and he's traveling by and he hears, and he comes and helps her. And of course, she's very suspicious of him, but she also hasn't seen any other people in over, I think, like a decade that she's been with her uncle. So it was a very interesting scenario. It was just the tiniest snippet of this couple though, and I really wanted more. But it was well written, and I guess there's a bunch of books in this series that are all just like the beginnings of a couple. And while I understand that, and for some people that'll be good, because not everyone wants epilogues and to see babies and to see happily ever after, so I get it. But for me, I need that because I'm reading for the HEA. And so for there not to be anything, it's difficult for me as well. So I gave that one 3 stars, but like I did not hate it. I just felt like unsatisfied with it is the thing. So yeah. Then there was Charm School by Susan Wiggs, and this was this was the first Susan Wiggs I've ever read, and this one was fascinating. It had so many layers to it. It really did. I read this for the Romance Readathon in August that we did that, and I really, really enjoyed this. So this was a great recommendation from Kim. This one involved a heroine who, she is seen as kind of this is like an ugly duckling retelling in a way, and she's falling in love with this one guy in the town, but he's never noticed her. All of her siblings are beautiful and elegant, and she's just seen as the ugly duckling. But she had spent some time with one of her aunts, and so now that she's a spinster, she wants to be more like her aunt. And so she ends up getting herself a job on this ship that's making a trip to, I think they're going to the Caribbean, and she gets herself a job on this ship. Now, the captain of this ship, he has ulterior motives, okay? He's working for a company. He's the captain of this ship, but he has other plans. So I won't go into the full thing of this, but let's just say him having this woman on his ship who may be spying on him for the owner is gonna put him in a tricky place. But I enjoyed this a lot, and I do want to read more in this series, so it was a 4-star. All right, then I read The Fallout by Every Thursday, and we'll give this credit to Mariah who recommended it, even though I have had The Fallout on my device since I read Manacled. It was my oldest fic that I had saved, and the audiobook was finally being produced. And so me and my friend Tiffany, after we did the most recent fanfiction readathon, we decided to just keep buddy reading that together. So I believe the full audio pod fic for this is available on Spotify now, but that is how I listened to it, was using that. And I gave it 4 stars. The Fallout is a very good one. Then there was The Harlot by Saskia Walker. I read that during the romance readathon. Did not like it. It's supposed to have a witch in it. There wasn't much magic going on in this one. And I gave it 2 stars. So we're going to move along because we've been talking for a long time. Worth the Fall by Claudia Connor. And here we have another 6-star read. This was delightful. As I've said, Matt may be my new Tristan Miles. There's still something special about the takeover, like that has not been unseated, but specifically the way Matt is with these 4 children by this single mother who is pregnant with the 5th one. He meets them when they are on vacation, and he completely falls for this family. Every single one of them desperately wants them, and he makes himself an integral part of their family. Now the mother, she is very like wowed by him, is kind of like, why does this handsome, hunky Navy SEAL of a man, why does he want me and my children? Like, what's going on? But she can't help but be swept up by him, just like all of his kids are. And each individual relationship he has with the children and the relationship between these two was beautiful. I just recently finished this trilogy, plus the novella that is about Matt and Abby, and I will never shut up about this series because it was just so sweet. And it was such a breath of fresh air during a time when so many books are so heavily spice focused. This series is just, it's so not the most important part of it at all, but yet their sexy times are so sweet, you know. Oh, it's beautiful. So 6 stars. Oceans of Us by Vanessa Louisa. This was one I ended up reading for Patreon as well. I gave it 3.5 stars. Fury by Loran Donner. This one I just did for Patreon. I gave it 3.5 stars. The Bartender's Pride by TJ Dallas. This was a sapphic, like, there was like gods and stuff involved in it as well, and I was really intrigued by what it was going to be, but it was 2-star for me. Didn't work. Choosing Her Alpha by Isoellen. This was an Omegaverse one that I recently just ranted about. It was not my cup of tea. Gave that 2 stars. Full Vows by Lillian Harris. This was recommended by Daniela. I'm trying to work my way through some more of Lillian's books. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I also ended up getting to listen to the audiobook of this one, and I enjoyed it quite a lot. Then we have Mistakes Were Made by Meryl Wilsner. This was recommended by Jess, the Golden Valkyrie, so thank you so much. This was a sapphic best friend's mom romance, and I had lots of high hopes for this one, and I did enjoy the audiobook, which was on Anyplay, but honestly, it annoyed me a bit that they were both so second-guessing of the relationship, and maybe it's just because it was both women. I don't know. Women can be more decisive than this. It just felt so drawn out, and there was so many, like, questions between these two of, like, if anything could happen, and it just got a little bit monotonous to me. But I loved particularly the beginning of this, of, like, how they first hook up, and I loved a lot of the phone situations they're in. I really should have included this one in my phone sex video. I totally forgot about it. And I liked how it ended, but there was a good chunk in the middle that I was just like, what are we doing? What are we doing? But I did give it 3.5 stars, and I would read another one by this author. And now the final book that I want to mention, and this was another one that I already had my eye on it, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to try it because of what I'll tell you in a second, but it was recommended by Rachel and it was Burned by Ivy Jackson. So Ivy Jackson is another pen name for Dana Isley. It's going to be her cowboy and small town romance title, and I'm not going to go into it because if you don't know the mess of it, doesn't matter, but Dana Isley was in a lot of hot water in like 2020 and she got canceled by a lot of people, and whether or not I agree with that, I still have to be careful sometimes about which books I read and how people will react to me doing that. I just do. I wish I didn't, but this is my business that I need to be careful. But after some more information came out later on, again, I'm not saying she's perfect. I'm not saying she didn't still do some shady things. Who's to say? But when more information came out, I felt like it was less black and white than people were making it. And I love cowboy romance. So I was already on edge about if I was going to read it. And then when a viewer was asking for me to read it, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a try because I'm willing to try anything. And I enjoyed this one quite a bit. So I gave it 4 stars. So there we go. That just got us caught up for all of the viewer recommendations. I mean, I think this is since like March or April, it might be, the ones that I've read. I feel like I've done better this year with these than I did like in 2022. I didn't read as many of these ones. But again, there's always such a gamut, and there always will be, because everybody's tastes are different. The books that we want people to read are also different. And some of them are going to be 6-star books and some of them are going to get DNF'd. It's just how it is. So again, I hope I didn't come across too harsh in the beginning of this video. I'm just being honest with you. I'm always going to be honest with you. I love having this book rec form. Does it cause me anxiety sometimes? Does it irritate me sometimes? Yes. But at the end of the day, you guys are taking your time to give me a book recommendation that I know you want me to check out. And I always want to be respectful with those. But also, I don't think it's too much to ask where I'm like, please do these things for me to check it out. Because at the end of the day, like, it's still a book that I'm going to be consuming and then possibly promoting on my channel. And there are just certain things that I want it to fit into if I'm going to do that. So there we go. But thank you so much for watching this video. This, of course, ended up being such a long ramble, but there we are. And we'll see you in the next one, friends. Bye.